Hi, and welcome to Editorial Interchange. We're honored to have Dr. Randell Trammell. He's running for the state superintendent position, heading up of the schools for the entire state. Randall, thanks for joining us.
I'm so glad to be here with you tonight, Steve.
Well, one of the things we love to do at Editorial Interchange is highlight our local economies. You're over in Cartersville. Do you have a locally owned business in your area you'd love to get a shout out to?
I absolutely do. One of my favorite companies is His Majesty Coach. They do buses, charter buses. We do a lot of work with them. They do a great job, take good care of you. So His Majesty Coach out of Kennesaw.
Awesome. Great. Well, if you're in need of a ride, you need a limousine service, you know where to go.
Right.
Hey, tell us about your journey leading up to your run for state school superintendent.
That's a great question. So, I'm a Georgia native. I grew up in Dalton, went to Reinhardt University for my undergraduate degree in religious education. I started out as a music education major, but changed it to religious education. Then went on to get a master's of business administration and started working for the state YMCA of Georgia. Now, a lot of times people think, the treadmills or stuff, but we were exclusively youth development and teaching civics and character programs. And I did that and for 5 years, and then they made me the CEO of the organization statewide. Um, Continued. I went back to school to get a doctorate in education, and that's when I really started digging in deep. In my specialty area of research is civic education and specifically how to develop young people into good citizens. And so during my research, I found out that the Carl Vinson Institute of the University of Georgia had stopped their K 12 public outreach around 2008, 2009. And I thought that was a travesty. And so I met with then State School Superintendent John Barge. I said, "What can I do? We've got this program. I'm in schools. I'm doing civic education." He said, "Our teachers need resources and our students need opportunities." So, with that, I founded the Georgia Center for Civic Engagement. And since that time, between the two organizations, I've served 23 years, about 1.7 million students, thousands of teachers across the state. And as of the past few years, we're now in 7 additional states. So that's kind of my journey of how I got to where I am today. My wife is a teacher, has been for 18 years, and my 3 young children are in public school here in Bartow County. My youngest is a kindergartner, and my oldest is fourth grade. And so we were looking, and I was just thinking, we can do so much better for our children. And then I saw we're ranked 38 in the nation for education. And I just got the ranking out today. We're number one business or number one state to do business in the country for 12 years going, but yet number 38 in education. And then you look at some of the reading numbers, most recently updated, 70% of our third and fourth graders can't read on level.
Oh.
So I got to thinking, you know what? We've got to do something. I teach my kids in my program and my own children, be the change you want to see in the world. And so it was time for me to lead by example. And that's how I'm here.
Now, you had this Georgia Center for Civic Engagement. Are you still involved with that?
I am. We've now expanded as the U.S. Center for Civic
Okay.
Engagement, and I'm serving as the national president. And yes, we're working in states all over the Southeast right now and expanding into others.
And what exactly does the center do with school systems?
Yeah. So our mission is to educate and equip students to become informed and active citizens. Now, we are a nonpartisan organization. We often say we want to teach students the process of how government works before the politics gets them. So we hope the process gets them before the politics do. Some of the programs we do include a model legislature where students take over the House and Senate and in the state capitol every year. That program started in 1946, so certainly long before I came along. And we've had so many wonderful leaders come up and go through that program that went on to serve. Former Governor Joe Frank Harris, um, lots of state representatives and mayors and city council members and just good citizens. And that's our aim, is to teach students to be the best that they can be for their community.
And is that more of a values and principles driven kind of educational component where you're trying to get them to, so it doesn't really delve into the social issues of our day, perhaps it's more or less, this is how you debate, this is how you handle your business and discuss things in a good manner, things like that.
So we certainly do teach Robert's Rules of Order and how to disagree without being disagreeable. But in that model legislature, for example, the students write their own legislation and they debate their own legislation. And there's really no subjects that we, will have off the table. So every year we'll have bills that come through on abortion or medical marijuana. It's really interesting. You can go back over the decades and really see what the hot spots are in terms of social issues. And so our theory, or our program, lets the students take what they're passionate about and use that as a way to teach them how to properly go through the process to make a difference and get laws passed.
With your background in civic education and whatnot, um, are you alarmed at the rate that we're seeing now where teachers are coming out of the teaching colleges and they have more of an activist bend where they try to put their ideology on the students, even at the youngest of ages now?
Yes, I believe that civics is a verb, and if you're expressing your civicness, that is through voting and through volunteering. But one thing that I can say about my teachers, even that taught political science, in high school and certainly in college, is they did so from a spot that I never truly knew what their political leaning was. They
Right.
were teaching the process. And now I'm afraid that that pure process is not being shared. That it's often tinged with their leaning, most often going out on the left side than on the right.
Do
It's
you
certainly alarming.
Yeah, I know we pull heavily, say, from the University of Georgia and their college education when we're filling vacancies within our school system, and
Sure.
of some of the other colleges and universities around too. Um, does the school superintendent have any impact on those institutions in terms of saying this is what we're looking for in our teachers, that we don't want the ideology driven, we'd more like to have the children explore their own ideas and we do it from an unbiased point of view? Is there any impact that the superintendent may have on that type of thing?
So certainly the state school superintendent sets the tone and tenor of all things public education in Georgia. Georgia is proud to be, and I'm proud to be in a local control state. And so your local board of education, your local superintendent really have more influence on the day-to-day operations, and it should reflect your community. But we set the standards of what should be taught or what must be taught at the State Department of Education. We provide the resources with that. Now, I have had a conversation recently with Chancellor Purdue, because one of the challenges that we have facing education today is a teacher pipeline crisis. What we're finding is that within the first 3 years, 53% of our new teachers are leaving the profession altogether. So I've been talking with the chancellor about how we address that, how we make sure that those teachers are coming out of the schools of education with appropriate training, to work with students today and to deal with not only the content but the teaching strategies that are appropriate. And as I'm touring the state, every time I go into a city with a college or university, I'm meeting with that local dean of education just to get some ideas on how we can better partner to address that teacher pipeline.
Sure, sure. And is there also an avenue for seasoned professionals who may be astute in mathematics and or what some other discipline, the sciences, whatever, but they don't have that teaching degree? Is there an avenue to get those professionals? Maybe they're later on in their professional career and they want to give back.
There certainly is. There is something called TAP, the Teacher Alternate preparation program. So let's say that you have a degree in chemistry or bioengineering or mathematics or something like that, and you've had a good career or accounting or something like that, but you don't have that teaching experience or certainly not their certificate. There's a way for you to get a temporary certificate and go through those alternate preparation programs to obtain that certification. And gosh, I was talking to someone the other day who was a second career teacher, and her first career was in marketing, and she was now teaching marketing in a high school. What better person to be teaching our high school students marketing than someone who's had a successful career in doing that,
Right.
who can come in and say, not only this is what the textbook says, but this is how it plays out in real life. And as we're preparing students for the workforce, gosh, that's such a great way to build that pipeline for employees, employers, local.
Let me talk about something here that every parent is aware of and every parent is concerned about. Safety in the schools.
Mhm.
Obviously, we've had some very recent
Yeah.
mass shootings within the school systems. Um, what kind of grade would you give Georgia in terms of promoting safe schools that would hinder someone from being able to achieve some of these tragic scenarios that we've seen across the country?
I would say we're probably a C, C plus. And I would say that because the legislature in this most recent session really, with the leadership of Representative Holt Persinger up from Barrow County, where the most recent tragedy took place up at Appalachia High School, um, he introduced some sweeping safety bills for schools that not only deals with hardening the infrastructure of the school and the building, keeping threats out, but also looking at our internal communication and reporting system that can examine the threats from within. In the particular case of the student who is accused of being the shooter in that case, he had transferred from another school system, and his records had not yet made it to that Barrow County school system. And so, had those records been there in time, there's a much better opportunity that the student could have been flagged, or at least people would be watching out for him. So there's a lot of things we can do. Some of our counties do it better than others. I was in Forsyth County, just north of Atlanta, not too long ago. Their school system has 57 school resource officers. Every high school has two, and every middle and elementary school has one. And so it's certainly a local government, county and or city partnership between law enforcement and the school system with support from the state.
Identifying scenarios. I know several of the cases across the country over the decades where it's been where a child has been bullied in the school system and felt like
Yes.
they've had no alternatives to escape the bullying. And then they show up to school with a gun. And of course, the tragedy ensues.
Right.
Is Are there methods to find those situations, locate where that bullying's going on, take some proactive action? Can the state mandate something be done in those scenarios so we don't have these tragic incidences?
Absolutely, and prevention is the best cure for anything. And one of the best things that have happened recently, again in this past legislative session, is where you had the K through eighth grade cell phone ban. When Steve, when you and I were younger and in school, if you had gotten a scuffle or something at school, or there's a bad day, you went home, and unless somebody was on the phone, there it there was a cooling off period.
Right.
And now there's not. I mean, the students are glued to their phone 24/7, middle of the night, and it just continues, and it festers, and it elevates. So mental health is definitely an issue. And when you're online and on your phone, you have a lot of people are much braver behind a screen or behind a keyboard than they would be in real life, and there's some consequences for that. So one approach obviously is that cell phone ban, and I would be supportive of that even going up through high school. Now, I know some parents push back and say, "Well, my child is in extracurriculars, or I need to know when to come pick them up." There's some ways we can do that, but in terms of in class and instruction, I think we need to do that. And another thing is that our guidance counselors in schools have really been relegated to doing testing and college admissions and stuff like that, and they're doing very little counseling supporting our students' emotional needs. And being a middle school student is rough. You've got the flood of hormones. Being a high school student's even rougher because you're sort of grown, but you're sort of not. So our students need support, and that's certainly something that I am making a priority as we keep our schools safe.
Well, as you said, we've recently been pegged number 38 in terms of achievement. How do we upgrade our system for academic success?
Well, it sounds silly, but the truth is it's quite easy. Go back to the basics: reading, writing, and arithmetic. The state legislature also passed last year a reading overhaul for our state, mandating that we use something called the science of reading as our tool to teach kids in elementary school how to read. And you and I know that, and probably were taught on that in its less fancy name, phonics. Hooked on phonics worked for me, and so it's that teaching approach. It's called the Mississippi Miracle. They did this a few years back. Um, we used to say in Georgia, well, at least we're not as bad as Mississippi. Well, Mississippi's now ranked number 14 in the nation, and if you control for variables such as socioeconomic status and some other things like that, they're number one. And what they found as they've started teaching kids to read, that their math scores increase, their science scores, social studies, all of those other things. Because to put it bluntly, if you can't read, you can't succeed. So we've got to emphasize our students learning how to read. And an alarming fact is that we predict the number of prison beds that we need to build based on that third grade reading level.
Yeah.
Now, if you remember at the beginning of our conversation, I said Georgia is at 70% of our third and fourth graders that cannot read on grade level. So in Georgia, we have to decide now that we're going to address it and we're going to teach kids to read, or we better start building a whole lot of prisons. I kind of think the easy answer is to teach kids to read.
Absolutely, and literacy is the fundamental building block for education, right? I mean,
It is.
if you can't have literate students, then don't expect anything else good to happen.
That's right.
Um, how are academic standards measured in Georgia and as opposed to the rest of the nation? And should teachers be held accountable if their students are not meeting those standards?
That's a great question. And I will tell you, the current superintendent has made a very concerted effort over his 12 years in office. By the time we get to the election, it'll be 12 years to reduce testing. And there are, I believe, the federal government requires 12 tests, and I believe Georgia has 13. So we have really ratcheted down and decreased the number of standardized tests that we give. The challenge with the tests that we do give is that many of them are Georgia developed. And so it's hard to compare apples to apples between Georgia and California, or Georgia and Mississippi, or Alabama, Tennessee. I would be supportive of us going towards more nationally criterion rate reference test, such as when I was in school, it was the Iowa test of basic skills, something that we can look at the skills and compare ourselves to other peers across the country. Um, I believe that we need to look at student growth. And if a student enters into third grade or fourth or whatever grade at this level, my bigger concern is where they end at the end of that school year. I want to make sure that we're always pushing kids forward according to their ability. One of the things that's challenging the paradigm that we are finding ourselves in education is, if you look at the traditional model of school, it's a Ford motor plant assembly line, right? And our kids' learning needs are certainly more complicated than a headlight here and a tail light there. So we're going to have to look at more advanced models of differentiated learning. So to get to your question about how our students are faring, um, it's tough because in a classroom you may have a very low level student, a very high level student, and the most are going to fall within the middle of that range. But the teacher's having to teach to both ends, and when that happens, everyone loses. And then you throw in the challenge of behavior, which we're having a crisis with in our state, in classroom behavior. Then it's even more complicated.
And, on the behavior issue, can you even hold teachers accountable for success in the classroom when they have these types of behavior issues, total disruptions, and there's really seems to be no consequences to remove that student from that scenario and try to get the other students back on track?
Well, I mean, you can hold the teacher accountable, but I don't think it's fair. It's like tying someone's hand behind their backs and throwing them in the deep end of the pool and saying, "Good luck. We'll see you at the end of the school year." We have a rating system in place right now called CCRPI, College Career Readiness Performance Index, and it's a scale of different individual measures. Attendance is one, academic performance, school climate, discipline is one of those. And what we found is that while it is measuring items, sometimes there are unintended consequences of that. So if you give out too many discipline referrals, particularly when you go into some sub demographic groups, then your school will get dinged, and it goes against their school climate score. So much so that a school system in North Georgia, already here, I mean, this was last week, September 17th, in this school year, had already given out all of their referrals that they can for the semester without damaging that school climate rating score. So what happens in that case is the principal's sending the child back to the classroom with a pat on the back and say, "Now, little Johnny, you need to do better." And because they don't want that score to be affected. Um, I'm kind of a simple guy in terms of I want I want parents and community members to be able to understand how a school's really doing. I call it the Waffle House scale. When you walk in the Waffle House, you look up on the wall and you'll see right when you walk in the door the health rating. And if there's a 37 there, when you're getting your hash brown scattered, smothered, and covered, you've made a choice that you're going to take a chance with that 37. Um, but we don't have that with our schools. You go to 123 Main Street because that's your assigned school for your territory, or you don't. Those are your options. Take it or leave it. And so I am championing a robust accountability system that allows us to measure what's important. And all of these things are based on student outcomes. And I want to make sure that the schools are safe, that teachers are in a safe classroom where they can teach, that's distraction free. I often say teachers are there to teach, students are there to learn, and anything that disrupts that is wrong and can't be tolerated.
I know Florida has had a lot of success, parents raving about school choice initiatives in that state,
Yes.
and I think we have some school systems that are perennial failing systems that just
Yes.
can't seem to get up to standard. And is the voucher system or, the charter school or, whatever the system may be as an alternative, is that the answer to fixing the really sick school systems that just can't get well?
I'm a parent choice advocate. In fact, I'm probably the only candidate in the race that has really making that a cornerstone of my campaign. And for me, I have to stop right there and define what choice is, because most people have painted in their mind that it's public school versus private school, and I'm sending my kid to so and so private school, and you're paying for it, and that's not necessarily the case. Private or charter schools are an option. Magnet schools are an option. College and career academies, homeschool, private school, universal enrollment within a county or an entire state. Those are all options. And what I like to tell folks is that I want to make sure that parents have every tool available to them in the tool bag and that they can choose what's best for their particular child. I have three children. My oldest is autistic, and she's level one, so she's um, very intelligent, very smart, very interactive. You would not know it when she comes home. It's a different story because she's in her safe spot. But she's currently thriving in her public school. But so many of the peers that also have autism or dyslexia are being forced into this environment where they're simply not thriving. And I think that's wrong. And and I always want to say, let me be clear. I'm running to be the Georgia Public Education Chief Public Education Officer. So with that, my aim, my daily mission is to make sure that the school at the end of your street, the public school, is so excellent that it is the choice. But until I can come up to you and shake your hand and look you in the eye, Steve, and say, absolutely, we're giving it our all, that school is successful, I feel that the state of Georgia owes it to our parents to have an option to do what they need to do for their children. Our Constitution requires that we give a free and appropriate public education. And as you mentioned, so many of our school systems across the state simply aren't meeting that standard.
Let me ask you this. What do we need to build a stronger, more ready workforce with these students? And give me an idea of what the parent's role is in the student's education in terms of getting them ready as well.
Well, let me start with the last part of your question. The parents are an absolutely integral part of this conversation. They're your children. And so we depend on you. You know, when you get them to us between the school bells, if you will, we're going to do what we're supposed to do. We're going to teach them reading, writing, arithmetic, math, art, science, all that sort of stuff. But we need you to be the parent. And there's some things that you need to teach them, like responsibility and showing up and doing the hard things and holding them accountable, you know, when they don't meet those expectations. So we definitely need our parents to show up and to support their students and hold their students accountable. So absolutely critical to that. And remind me the first part of your
Well,
question.
building a stronger,
Oh,
more ready
yes.
workforce as
So
well.
for so many years, we have allowed ourselves to fall for the thought that every child needs to go to college. And listen, I'm an educator. I have multiple college degrees. But quite frankly, I was telling someone last night. One of my friends that I went to high school with didn't go to college. He got his HVAC license, and I guarantee you, and he owns his own company now, I guarantee you he probably makes four times or five times more a year than I make with my doctorate in education. We have an incredible career technical and agriculture education program in Georgia. I see it as I travel around the countries, and everyone's always looking to Georgia to lead in that. That's one thing we're doing very well. And um, we have incredible partnerships with business and industry in each of the areas. For example, you're in Fayette County. You've got Trilla Studios. There's a wonderful partnership between the Fayette County Schools and Trilla Studios to support that local economy and get students into that pathway. I helped establish um, a, um, a pathway not too long ago in the Department of Education called Government and Public Administration, and that's to help fill in these holes in law and public safety, in our public service. You know, customer service folks, potential elected officials, because being a former elected official yourself and now a candidate again, you know that at any given time today, our 70% of our local and state public service workforce could retire, and we don't have a pipeline for that. So it's finding those areas in the workforce that are needed, and we have a high demand career list out there, and we are putting kids in those areas where they can get those on the job training, they can get certifications while they're in high school, they can do dual enrollment, and when they walk across the stage with their graduation diploma from high school, even their associate's degree. So it's making sure that every child has a path. And I like to say it's the 4 E's. You've got employment. So if they want to go down that path, when they graduate, hopefully they have everything they need to be employed. Entrepreneurship. There's some folks, a student that was in my program, he started his first business in high school and sold it a few years ago for $3 million. As a high school student, he started that. Enlisting in the armed services. I think it's so important that that's an option. And then enrollment into technical school or into higher education, into 4 year college.
One reason why I blended the parent question with the workforce question is one thing that I have noticed a lot. I've done internships with both our city government and our county government, started internship programs for high school students.
Hmm.
And one thing I noticed that they don't have a lot of those tangible social skills in
Hmm.
adulting. And I was wondering, do the parents and the school systems play off of one another to try to give that child a leg up, especially those high school students who are looking for a job? Sometimes, Randall, it's just something as easy as not being able to do a handshake properly,
Right.
not knowing how to address that person that's going to be interviewing me for this job,
That's
not
right.
knowing how to dress for that interview for that job. Just simple things, how to present yourself. And those things are so critical in terms of the competition out there in the workaday world.
Hmm.
Um, how do we get that into those kids? And is that the school's responsibility, or is that the parents' responsibility, or both?
I think it's both. What you do see though sometimes is that the parents may not have those skills themselves.
Right.
And again, that's not making a judgment call. That's just the reality that some of our citizens find themselves in. If the students are in the Career Technical Agriculture Education Program, CTAE, then they, in each of their courses, the first standard is called employability skills. So it is showing up. It's handshake. Be firm, not too firm, not a floppy fish. Going through those things. Look someone eye to eye. These are skills that likely our parents taught us when we were growing up. When someone enters the room, stand. Those kind of things, and certainly things that I'm trying to teach my son and my daughters. But the schools do have a role in that, particularly as it's feeding into those pipelines with the industry. The number one need that we're hearing from our business and industry supporters across the state is that our students just don't have the social skills. They can't put their phone down,
Right.
or they won't call in sick. They just don't show up. And of course, those are skills that we have to have. You have to have a dependable workforce, and so in our CTAE programs, we do teach that, and it's in every one of their courses is a standard. And perhaps we need to make sure that every student going through high school has a CTAE pathway that they go into. That doesn't mean that you have to, go into journalism or whatever, but that every student has some skills that they can fall on if they, decide not to go to college or whatever.
Sure, sure. Um, does the state have a role in ensuring that teachers in the classroom are capable and qualified? Is there a grading system for that? Well, I'll tell you, I have two grown daughters, so I've been all the way through the school system. Um, they could all tell you, all the kids could tell you which teachers didn't teach well in the classroom. They all knew this. There
Yes.
there was that class to avoid because you're not gonna learn anything and you won't be able to achieve at the next level in the next grade if you use them. How do we address that as at the state level, and do you address that at the state level?
So we certainly need to set high expectations of what our teachers do. Right now, and there's a county uh, on the east part of the state where 51% of their teachers are not even credentialed to teach. They're just good people, perhaps
Right.
that filled the job. So we've got to make sure that we once again professionalize that career, that we have quality candidates, that we give them reasons to stay in the job. And money's not all of it. The governor and the legislature over the past few years have been very generous to teachers and have made large strides um, to increasing teacher pay. In fact, right now in the Southeast United States, Georgia is the number one in terms of first year teacher salaries. So I'm very proud of that. But we've got to do more. We've got to figure out how to keep those seasoned, tenured, great professionals in the classroom so that they can continue to impact the students that come on. And you're right. I had teachers, and you probably did too, that you knew that you were going in and you were going to be watching whatever game was on or whatever. Quite frankly, the teachers have an obligation. Their teachers are there to teach, students are there to learn, and anything that interrupts that is wrong. And I believe teachers should be held to a standard.
Is there an evaluation or some sort of criteria used by the state for teachers?
There is a evaluation system that's used on teachers called Teacher Keys. It's TKEYS, Teacher Keys, and the local administrator, the principal of the school, will go in throughout the school year and do observations to observe, are they doing this, are they doing this, and they'll make notes on that. And so they'll be ranked as proficient or excellent, exemplary or struggling, and if they get too many of the lower scores, it's on a 4-point system. If they get too many ones and twos, they'll be put on a professional development plan. But again, you've got to start with excellence, so you can build from there.
Well, I was a PTO president for our local middle school here. And of course, I didn't have a background in education, so I was definitely out of the box thinker because I didn't even know where the box was. So, so, so I got in as the middle school teacher, and one thing I asked the principal right off the bat was, "Well, do we ever survey the patrons?" And I kind of got a blank stare at first, like, what are you talking about? Well, the students, they're the patrons of our educational system here in the building. Do we ever survey them to ask them how they feel about the quality of education that they're getting, and how the teaching are doing, and maybe if is there bullying in the school or anything like this? And he said, no, we don't do that. But he just said, I am going to do it. And much to his credit, he set up a big survey system on the computer lab,
Mhm.
and they had each one of the classes go in one at a time, and they did the survey. And he was pleasantly surprised about the results and how
Good.
it turned out. But they also pointed out some problems that he had
Mhm.
never thought about. So,
Mm.
is there any effort to possibly, ask the students themselves as the consumers of the education, what they feel about the school, the administration, the teachers, and the quality of their education?
I think that's entirely appropriate. I mean, not only are they your consumers, they are your product. So it's a very unique
Yeah,
combination. And you want your product to be successful and to speak highly for you. And sometimes you need those minor adjustments that you can't see as the principal or the teacher um, to be addressed. And I think it's highly appropriate to do those surveys. Certainly, they're not going to have the technical terms, well, Miss Jones is, rough on her pedagogy or whatever, but you can get the idea.
sure.
If you constantly see, Miss Jones or Mr. Anderson or whatever has a challenge, or, all kids are going to say the lunchroom food is terrible. but it will give you an idea if you see some trends that you can do further research and investigate what's going on there.
Well, I do know, as someone who's lived in metropolitan Atlanta the majority of my life, one of the big complaints I hear from Atlanta parents in school systems, and I don't know if it's the same on the rest of the state, but there's a consistent complaint that there are too many administrators in non-teaching capacities in the schools, and they're being told, we can't have this aide in the classroom, or we're going to have to increase the number of students per classroom, and yet they're adding administrators. Is that a problem? Do you see that as a problem?
I do, and some of it, Steve, is um, I carry around in my pocket. This is a list of uh, ever increasing burdens on Americans' public schools, and it I mean it literally is. I mean it's
That's a lot of
huge.
burdens.
It's a lot of hard, and it takes you through the decades. And right now, and those are federal mandates, by the way. Certainly, I am a supporter of the U.S. Department of Education going away, because in dealing with the federal government, for every dollar you get, number one, you spend $1.20 to get it, but there's so much reporting, and you've got to have somebody to make sure that the reporting's right. So a lot of that administrative uh, swelling, if you will, has come from those federal mandates. I believe some of that will disappear with the departure of the U.S. Department of Education. But there are some areas where I feel like it would be better served for us to have additional hands and feet in the field, if you will, serving the teachers and serving the students than it would be have another administrator in the office. Um, I have heard of a superintendent that said for every teaching position that we're going to cut an administrative position too. And during COVID, there was a flood of federal funds that came into our state education system, and a lot of schools really insist on use that money and really got bloated in terms of administration. And I don't know if you've been watching, but the Dublin City Schools is in quite a financial quagmire right now. They're going to have a $14 million deficit
Oh,
by June. They only received $16 million from the state, so they can no longer operate. So the state is either going to have to come in and bail them out with taxpayer money, or they're going to have to shut down that system and merge it with Lawrence County schools. Um, so is it mismanagement? I don't know. I do know that they've not turned in their financial audits to the State Department of Education since 2022. So perhaps we could have seen earlier, and had an earlier intervention. But property taxes are a huge issue in local communities. I don't know if it's a red hot issue in my community, and of a school's funding, about 10% comes from federal resources, about 43 from the state of Georgia, and the rest has to come from your local tax digest. And so when you have situations where there is bloat, um, citizens are well within their right to ask, do we really need this? And is this investment making a difference for our kids?
yeah, and I see one of the biggest issues when you're dealing with a school system and your property taxes for schools and whatnot. There's always this plea that, well, it's for the children, right? And it's a very emotional thing because
Sure,
everyone wants their children to do well. Everyone wants
sure,
their children to have a good education and have the best of life that they can possibly offer them. So it's really hard to say, no, go back, get your pencil out, go through those numbers again, and let's start shaving that down, because you feel like you're cheating the
sure.
children when in essence you may be cheating them by not doing that.
Yeah, money is not the sole answer. If it were, take Atlanta Public Schools for example, it's well funded with tax money. They have some of the highest investment from private foundations in the state. there's a lot of money per student going into that system, and yet overall, many of their schools are failing on a regular basis. So money is not the answer to everything.
Right. Back to the federal Department of Education. Do you really think they're actually going to eliminate it wholesale?
Well, it would take an act of Congress to do that. So a lot of it will depend on how the midterm elections go. I think in many cases that it will be stripped down to the bare minimum, even if uh, uh, the midterms don't go the way of the Republicans. And some of those areas of compliance are going to be torn down. I mean, the whole mantra of the Trump administration is to remove regulations from business and industry and education, all sectors of our economy and our American life, so citizens can live, so they can breathe, and so they can be successful. So it may not be a total, decimation, if you will, of the U.S. Department of Education, but I think come this time, in a few years, it's going to be very different than what it is today.
Do you see it as a hindrance that states are so dependent on federal money for schools because it draws you into that octopus that just puts all the tentacles around you and won't let you go with the regulations and everything that comes with the money?
It is. The state of Georgia could, and I would say should, look at the amount of federal funds that we receive, and we should prepare, possibly not to get those. Like I said earlier, for every dollar in state or in federal funding we get, we pay $1.20 to get it. So we might find that we aren't losing as much as we think we are if we forego some of those federal funds.
Yeah, I know that the same thing happens with road money, and I tried to convince a lot of our people in the state legislature when I was on the county board of commissioners. I said, "You're spending $1.15 for every dollar that you get." I said, "Maybe if we just did the federal gas tax ourselves and didn't
That's
give it
right.
to the feds, we'd be well off." And they were so used and stuck to that system, they couldn't get out of it. But, it's the same analogy there.
It is.
Well, on the social skills related to the digital age
Mm.
here, obviously, we're seeing more Chromebooks in the classroom, more computer labs, more incredibly smart boards for the teacher to use with all the fancy bells and the whistles.
Yeah.
You know, Early on, you said we need to get back to the basics.
Mhm.
Is that destroying our ability to get back to the basics? Are we creating another problem that we're going to have to look back and say, man, did we blow it by going too heavy into the digital age?
Well, certainly, technology is here to stay, and artificial intelligence is doubling every few days in its ability. I think that we need to find smart ways to employ technology. Our children, my 5-year-old is a digital native. So if I can't figure out something on my iPhone, she's like, "Here, Dad," and she just does all the stuff. And I'm not an old man, but we've got to find a way to employ technology and artificial intelligence in our classrooms so that our students are familiar with it. Use it to assist our teachers in lesson planning. You could use it to assist our teachers in differentiated instruction for those different levels. There's a lot of things that we should examine, and I quite frankly think that we should be on the cutting edge of it. We should understand it better than anyone else. That's where our society's going. At the same time, I believe that students need to be able to crack open a book, get a paper cut. There's some real tangible things that there should be. And I think we have to be careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I know that a lot of school systems have gone with the Chromebooks, and they don't have textbooks necessarily. It's a digital textbook on their Chromebook. But I'll tell you personally, when I was doing my doctoral studies, a lot of the classes had gone to that, and I either had to print out everything so I could touch it, and highlight it and make my notes on there, or I had to just buy the books. So I try to balance myself between this is, the old generation, the new generation. I think that we're in a world, at least right now in 2025, that we need to have our foot firmly planted in both.
Right. Well, yeah, artificial intelligence, I'm glad you brought that up. We're seeing more and more at the college level, at least, and I'm sure it's going to trickle down to high schools and middle schools where you have kids who are literally doing their assignments through artificial intelligence.
Okay.
And I've read several articles in the Wall Street Journal over the past year where they talk about the harmful effects of artificial intelligence and that it's causing us to think less. We're generating less energy in our brains, and there's less electricity going on in there when we're using artificial intelligence. It's kind of dumbing us down. So, should there be limitations on how much we can use artificial intelligence in the classroom? And
Well, that's a great question. Last March, I was up in Washington D.C. at Georgetown University with a group of educators from across the country, and the dean of the college, the dean of the university, the academic dean, came out and he said, "Listen, folks, a lot of higher education is trying to figure out what do we do. It's good, it's bad, we don't know." And he said, "Here's the deal. It's here." And so Georgetown is going to be accepting the use of artificial intelligence, despite the chagrin of many of our faculty and staff. But we need to teach students to use it to refine their voice, not to replace their voice. So, you still, if you happen to write an essay on Huckleberry Finn, for example, it's not a perfect language model. I mean, it can put out some stuff that is quite frankly false.
right.
So you have to know enough about it, the topic or whatever that you're writing, to have an intelligent discernment about whether or not it's giving you good stuff or not. It sort of reminds me back to the days when I was in school, and it was the question about whether or not you could use a calculator, in math,
Yeah.
because your brain's going to go to mush. Well, it's a tool, and I just think that we need to be very careful that it doesn't allow us to replace our ability to think, but it enhances our ability to think and act and make decisions, and give us options to go with.
I've always noticed too, one of the big symbols, I think, of the technology age and versus education or the blending of those two is a lot of the tech titans never allowed their children to immerse themselves in technology. Bill Gates,
Yep.
Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, who's a father with younger children. He just enrolled his children in a Montessori based school that doesn't use technology. Is that a wake up call for us that we should be paying attention? If they're not doing it, that we should probably think about it?
I mean, you would think so. I mean, if your product is so great, you'd want everyone to have it. We've made the decision for our family, and this is a weekly argument with my fourth grader that our children are not going to have cell phones until they're in high school and driving. And I remind them often, when you do get a cell phone, it's not for your convenience; it's for my convenience to make sure I know where you are and I can get in touch with you. Um, but I mean, even as young, I mean, my oldest daughter, she's 10. She's been, requesting a cell phone, an iPhone, since she was in first grade, and I'm like, no. So we know that things can be addictive with technology. They're built that way.
Yeah.
I mean, just you and I. Let's go for one day without looking at our iPhone. So I think that Zuckerberg and all those folks, I think they know what their products do, and I think it's wise, that they protect their children from it, just the same way that I protect ours. And not only that, when you give your children a phone, you give them unfettered access to the world.
Right.
And there's just some things that I want to protect my child and my children from, and I want to protect that innocence as long as I can.
I know with girls, especially, I had two girls. Um, there's a lot of self esteem issues with that. A lot of unfounded expectations that are put on girls through that. I don't see it as much with boys, but with the girls, it's really, really serious.
That's right.
And for the younger, for the younger girls, I really hate to see so many elementary school age children and they're thumbing through Instagram and these other things. And boy, they're
Mm,
getting this image of this is what it takes for me to be this person. And it overrides the parental
that's
guidance.
right. Well, and not only that, they fail to realize that, I mean, like magazine covers, right? Those are photoshopped and they're touched up and we'll save a few pounds off here. It's hyper reality. And it's a false reality and we have to protect our children from that.
Well, we've hit a whole range of issues. Is there anything that you'd like to bring up that we haven't discussed that you'd like to tell potential voters?
Well, the only thing I would say, and again, I'm a Republican and I believe in Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment that you shall not talk ill of another Republican. But I will say, we're 38th in the nation in education. 70% of our children in third and fourth grade are not reading on grade level. And our incumbent has been in office going on 12 years. That's an entire student's K 12 lifetime. And I think it's time for a change and I want to bring a fresh new perspective to this. I'm in it. I'm still in the parent drop off line. My wife's a teacher, and I just believe the very best for Georgia is in the future. And listen, when you think about it, Trammell stands for excellence, and I hope that your listeners will visit my website. Trammell for Georgia spelled out, FOR Georgia spelled out.com and connect with me. Would love to chat with you, email back and forth or phone. My cell phone number's available on the website because I'm here to work for Georgians and to make life better for our kids.
Well, we greatly appreciate you taking the time. It's
Thank
been a
you, sir.
valuable conversation. It's a topic that every parent is interested in. So you're holding everybody's rapt attention, and hopefully they'll get a lot out of this interview. Thank you for sharing with us.
Thank you, and have a great day. Thanks for hosting me, Steve.
You're welcome.